Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to be here at KM World. This is our track A4, which is going to explore today the intersection between artificial intelligence and knowledge management. Now, before we begin the session, I just have a couple notes on how to engage with this new virtual platform that we're using for KM World. You have a chat window that's just immediately to the right of the FeedLoop video player, and you can chat along with your fellow attendees about what you're hearing, what you're seeing in the session, what's going on at the conference. Please pose questions to our presenters, and we'll be collecting those questions and conducting a quick Q&A just at the end of this session here today. Now, if you have any technical issues that you might be experiencing, please let us know about that, and we'll do our best to take care of those. After the session, we do encourage you to go ahead and join your presenters today in the networking area, and you'll just click on the room that corresponds to the conference or track. All right, that's our housekeeping this morning. So let's go ahead and kick off our first session for the AIKM track, which is the AI landscape in knowledge management. I'm so thrilled this morning to introduce Dr. Annie Green. Dr. Green is an AI and KM consultant. She's an assistant professorial lecturer at George Washington University, and she contributed to development for the AI management certification at Georgetown. Her work aligns with organizations to help them achieve a thinking organization for improved performance. We're so happy to have Dr. Green with us here today. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Green, and she'll begin her presentation momentarily. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. I'm happy to see those of you who have come out to hear us speak. And as Elizabeth said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the convergence of KM and AI. And basically, you're going to see I'm going to take you down a path of a term that has been visible for quite some while, but seems to always be an illusion, which is cognition. So mine is going to be with the questions that were asked is what technologies are really needed to be able to create this type of landscape, and then what do you see for the future? So if you bear with me, I'm going to take you through this story, and I'm going to give you some insights into where I think it's going to go. Now, I always have to have my quote so that I can set the stage for what I'm about to say. And the thing is, it must be considered that there's nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous than to initiate a new order of things. We've been working in KM and AI for quite some time, okay? And we are working on a lot of areas, and they seem to be kind of disparate and all over the place, but they're successful. We're having success with it. But one of the things that we've kind of, I think, moved away from, and which is an area that I've worked in and that I think that has always been the goal, which is to improve the performance of the organization. Even if we're creating autonomous cars, we're improving an organization that is using them within. We're improving perhaps the life of someone who can't drive but needs to be driven around. So it's always that element of performance that we need to think about, and how do we get there to know that we're being efficient and effective at what we're doing. We're very effective right now, but when we start putting things into place, are they efficient? So as you look at this timeline, you'll see that, and even prior to this, we've had business intelligence, which actually kind of crept up in 1865 when Richard Milner Gevins began to look at the way data was gathered and then used by some bankers to get ahead of their competitors. And then we look and we move forward, and we see that artificial intelligence takes its introduction in 1956 with John McCarthy. But as we look through, we'll see that there are other things that happen, like in the 1950s, where the theories of mind became actually prominent. And then in the 70s, when they started doing the cognitive science so that they could bring in organization origin. And we get to the 90s and we get to knowledge management. And then we get to 2005 and we get to big data. And it's interesting because we actually work on one of these areas and then it kind of disappears while we work on another area. So what I'm going to head toward before we get to the technology is, the one area where I think that we probably need to improve so that we can see efficiency, which is the integration of them. Or the convergence, how do we bring these together so that we get, and here's that word that, we stopped using for a while, but that actually was brought out in the 1970s for business intelligence. It was supposed to be a business intelligence system, and somehow system got dropped. So we need to put system back into place so that we can see how all of these things are interrelated so that they can actually take us to the ultimate point of cognition, awareness, thinking, and being able to augment that thinking so that we can have success with performance. So as we move along and saying that, there's something that I want you to think about. Artificial intelligence can be used in products, in process, and in insight applications. Now, here's what's key to that. You need to know the proper level of abstraction for it. I know that we get excited sometimes as technology and we say, wow, we got robots, wow, we have autonomous cars, we have all of this stuff now that can do things for us, but remember, and we think this is new, but it's not. At one point when I said autonomous cars, and I said, do you realize that there has been autopilot for quite some time? So that is pretty much the same type of technology because you have an autopilot, but you also have a pilot, a human pilot that augments that. So we have to look at where this is inserted in whatever enterprise we're working with so that we can again see if it is effective and then ultimately if it is efficient within the organization. We don't want to fall into the guise of like the ATMs again, where we were supposed to automate tellers. So we created a teller machine and no longer were you supposed to go in and see a teller because it was supposed to cut down on the costs for the banking industry. But yet the ATMs came forth, the teller stayed, the ATMs cost more, and subsequently it costs more to run that particular process, even though we had built artificial intelligence into an ATM machine so that it could do standard transaction processing at a general level. So those are things that we really need to think about. The other thing I want you to think about as I'm going through this is something to know. Intelligence is proactive knowledge. So yeah, we have all of this data that we're gathering before we even get to where we're talking about intelligence and knowledge. And we also need to think about, here's that area again, the structure and the system that integrates these two. And we also need, and this is what's critical, because you're going to go on the other side, and even with ethics and some of the things that are going to impact, that are going to not have the integrity that we need, you're going to have to look at the tremendous intelligence base that has been validated and certified and stamped so that when we're pulling that data into, putting that data into an intelligence structure, we know what it means. Now, here's the irony too. Knowledge is intelligence that has been acted on. So you cannot separate them. They're not mutually exclusive, okay? So if intelligence is not constructed, then proactive knowledge cannot exist. So where do we fall with that? We fall right into that realm of gosh and guess and gosh again. We get expected outcomes that might be right, but then we also run a high risk that we get some that are pretty bad because we didn't understand what we were doing when we started. Let's talk a little about fusion of intelligence and knowledge, being cognition. If you look in intelligence, we seek to find things, we seek to set things up. We're doing some comprehension and some discernment. And when we begin to move forward into knowledge, we're actually adding into that. We start to add the consciousness of it, the awareness, and also the realization, because when we get to knowledge, those models should actually represent our reality so that we can kind of gauge what we're doing. This is interesting because we do this on the financial or the tangible aspect of our organizations, but we don't do this on the intangible aspects of our organization. And the problem here is that usually tangible represents only 5 to 20% of an organization, whereas intangible represents 80, could represent 80 and up to even 90%. So we need to have those defined. And in some cases we don't, because intangibles began to crop up, and we had to find the skill set to say, I can design these types of structures so that we can actually gather the knowledge we need to improve our organizations. And that's where we come into that cognitive realm, because we get into the cognitive realm and we're reasoning and thinking. And all along the way, from intelligence even to cognition, we're actually building in what we would still term artificial intelligence, because we're capturing our thought patterns and putting them into a computer. And we have a lot of colloidal effects, and we have a lot of other additional outside areas like ethics and integrity that we need to incorporate into what we're doing. There's, this cognitive model needs these attributes in order for us to be able to reach the point where we're actually leveraging what we know and the intelligence that we've gathered. I'm going to change the current narrative for you. And I'm going to try to keep it in a simple perspective, because we've been using this for quite some time. And that is that pyramid. The pyramid that we've been using usually takes us through data, information, knowledge, and then wisdom. And I know most of you've seen this before, okay? Well, I'm going to change that narrative and give a new one. And I'm going to say, let's put intelligence and let's put cognition in there, because we have data, we have the information. Intelligence needs to be clearly defined as well. And knowledge has to be defined based on that actionable data that comes out of intelligence. And when we reach the level of thinking, we hit cognition. So let's not void those from our current, from what we're currently doing. So this is the new narrative that I'm putting forth so that we include all components of cognition within our models. I know this is a little busy, but it kind of puts it in a knowledge perspective. And sometimes it'll help you see some of the areas that we've put together. If you look over to the left, you see even going up that path, which are things that are prominent today, data management, which includes data governance, which is very needed today, because that data is like, it's like the blood going through our system. That's what's transporting everything that we need to know. Then we have these information systems that we need to tie to, because these information systems actually align us with our business processes and functions. We then need to take that information, and here's the thing, between that data and that information, we need to have a language that is a business language or a common language that allows us to relate it back to our reality, such that we can understand how we're moving forward. And then we also, when we get to that point, we can build these intelligent models that actually speak the language that the business user needs to understand, and that we can then model and actually think about in the realm of how we would use them. And then you look, so we're in intelligence, we're in artificial intelligence, and I put business in quotations because business intelligence is artificial intelligence. It's just in context when you call it business intelligence. Then we had a lead up to knowledge management, which is that other area that we've been working on. And then when we go up further, we go into decision management, which gives us that cognition. So when you look to the left, you begin to see what's out there and what we're actually doing. And then as you go over to the right, you'll see where it's driving certain outcomes, but then you also need certain support areas, the same way you've had with any type of value chain, or when you're elevating value. So we look over there and we know we need digital transformation. Again, that language and that structure that actually mimics what we're doing. We need process management, because that's what drives our operations. Change management, because once we identify actionable data, we need to make some action, which is to begin knowing whether to change or not. Once we've gotten to the data driven, we're learning. So we put that into our organization, and we must learn, and that leads toward your adoption. And then we get to the top part and we say, what we put in place, is it adding value? Was it efficient? And we're right there in performance management. Now, real quick, and I know you can't read through this whole slide, but this just kind of gives you all of the technologies that we need to get from data to cognition. There are a lot of them. So we need to think through We can do a nice architecture and say, okay, these are the pieces that plug in together, but we also need to engineer these so that we know what the inputs and outputs are going to be for each one of these systems. And I'm not saying that, and you notice that I don't have here vendor names. What I have is technology names, because you have many vendors out there that will actually be able to accommodate these technologies, but it's up to you to decide which one is the best fit. So that shows you that it's not just one set. You could find one vendor that accommodates quite a few of these areas, but that might not be realistic. And this might not be an exhaustive list, because there may be some other things that I didn't capture here, but this gives you an idea of most of the computing or the technology that you really need to consider. So an enterprise digital structure, that's what we need. And we need to know and have information that's known, applied, disseminated to sustain and improve and renew our enterprise. That's what we need for the future. We need to understand how this structure works so that we can get the best results out of it and make the best decisions for us. And again, within that digital structure, you're going to have areas of products that are artificial intelligence like we see today, like robots. So I'm saying that enterprise cognition is what we need to do in the future. And we need to be able to see all of the components that go with it. I'm not going to read through this, but it's systemic. So we have systemic learning. And what's interesting is what you have then is dynamic. You'll be able to learn from these old problems. You'll be able to generate new knowledge and new hypotheses. You'll be able to have effective interventions. And that's what we want. We want interventions that we're not just guessing at. We're saying, okay, this was the symptom, so this is the way we'll treat it. You want to know for sure that you're treating the right disease, so to speak. So you want to be able to have all of those interventions that drive it from the data that comes, that gives you insights into what are all the characteristics or parameters that must be there to make the right decision. So, and speaking of that, it's like 6 areas that you kind of go at, and most of it is you got to mimic this cognition. You got to have a symbolic representation. You got to understand the functions which the intelligence is trying to achieve, and also the relationships, which is critical. And one of the things you got to recognize too is the vital functions. A lot of times we go after everything. And sometimes what we need to do is go after vital. It's like with the doctor's office. When you go in there, they look at your vitals first, because your vitals are the level that tell them that something is wrong. And then they can drill down from that vital into the organs that are affected, or the organs that actually give you the results for that particular vital. So within our organizations, we need to, or enterprises, we need to know what is vital for us that's going to bring value. And then how does it tie to these components so that I know that I'm going on the right structure. We want to, again, with the relationships, imitate the colloidal properties. And you can even do innovation with this, because once you know those vitals or those domain areas and you have all of the measurements and the indicators within, you can cross-pollinate all of those, and things that you didn't think would show up will show up in those and in those algorithms, okay? Establish a presence or a degree of knowledge to determine performance, which is our ultimate goal with a lot of what we are doing. I'm not going to really walk through this one as much. You can look at it, but the emphasis here is you want a dynamic enterprise need. So when you build the structure, then we can fit into these areas of data as a service, because we know the data. So we can, users can go and get the data. It's clearly defined. We have democratized this because it's in business language. And now we can have the end users actually going and getting some of this themselves. Knowledge as a service. If we know the knowledge we want and we are familiar with the language of it, then we can go and get it and make decisions. Innovation as a service, and so on. So we do want that dynamic enterprise need. Something else with transformation, we need to get it right. The one thing that you need to realize, if the data is erroneous, the risk of moving the enterprise along a catastrophic path is elevated. We back out too many times. Sometimes we're going to have errors, but let's minimize those errors by making certain that on the onset, we understand the language that we're putting into place. Beware, it is a system. So you have to be cognizant of certain things that already exist. You know, the six battles, what, why, who, when, how, those are still there. People, process, information is still there. Skills and ability, all of those come into the mix with the system. So when you're putting together this cognitive system, those still work. You still have the frameworks out there. Bring the frameworks together and tailor them so that they work within your environment. These just gives a few of what management should do. Again, it's just understanding the context, the role of strategy, the architecture. And, you know, we have to realize that a lot of this, when it comes to strategy, comes from the mind of the leaders. So therefore, we have to bring them to the table and understand what the leaders need to know and should know, what leadership should know as well. So I'm going to move because I got 20 minutes and I think I've finished up just in time. This is very quick, but I have some articles that you can read at the back. I've written them with a program at Georgetown. Take a read on them. I think they'll give you some interesting insights into why we need to make digital transformation, knowledge management, artificial intelligence, and all of them come together so that we reach the ultimate goal of cognition within our environments. And I thank you for listening to me. And now I will pass it back over to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Green. That was really insightful and gave us a lot of food for thought here this morning. Uh, we'll go ahead and give us a moment just to change out the screen share. And Dr. Green, before I let you go, do you know if you've got your deck posted so that those attendees can just click on those links?
Yes, it's on the, it should be on the portal. I put it out on the
Wonderful.
portal.
Wonderful. Okay, well, fantastic. All right, I'll let you go ahead and stop your screen share, and we'll tee it up here
Okay.
for Tony. Thank you so much, Dr. Green.
There you go.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Well, our session is transitioning to our next speaker. So I have Tony Rem, who's the CEO and principal consultant at AJ Rem and Associates. His firm has been helping venture capitalists and investment firms since 1990 with technological innovation and understanding trends. Tony is also the author. His most recent book, Knowledge Management in Practice. So we are so excited to have Dr. Rim with us today. And Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, fantastic. Hopefully everybody can see my screen, and I am going to go through my presentation and talk about, again, what Dr. Green has mentioned, more on the AI landscape in knowledge management. And as I go through this presentation, you'll see some of the synergistic areas in which Dr. Green had talked about. And my focus is going to be moving into those knowledge paradigms that are emerging. And I'm going to speak specifically to technology vendors that will cover a lot of the information that Dr. Green has mentioned. And so I'm taking another dive into that, but saying, okay, if you want to do implement a certain paradigm, these are some technology vendors to consider. Okay, a little bit about me. You just heard from Elizabeth. Over 30 years in this business, published author, several books, also professor at a couple of different universities during my time. And like Annie Green was talking about, you know, all the architectures and different technologies. I'm that guy who implements those types of things for organizations and makes those strategies realized from the management perspective. So at the end of the day, what we're seeing in the industry is the merging of artificial intelligence and knowledge management. And it's been going on for quite some time as these disciplines come together. One of the things I want to also point out, you may hear me refer back to Dr. Green's presentation because it really resonates here, because she spoke about data, information, intelligence, knowledge, and cognition. I may not have it in the right order, but that is specifically what she's been presenting. And so I take that same shift and now align it to more of what we're delivering from an AI and KM perspective. And so we want to talk about now why knowledge management needs artificial intelligence. So as we realize, there is a multitude of information and knowledge in our organizations, and it is in the form of the tangible assets, explicit knowledge, as well as the tacit knowledge in individuals. And so there is a need to connect both of that together to enrich the knowledge experience for our users, tapping into an organization's collective knowledge. So AI plays a key role in elevating that knowledge discovery within your organization. There's also a need to focus on assessing the knowledge you need in a timely, accessing the knowledge you need in a timely fashion. Many times we hear that, oh, I cannot find this briefing, or I cannot find this strategy, or I cannot find whatever. And it's the chore to search through the multitude of information, knowledge content within an organization. A lot of times folks will say, well, the search engine is not working, it's inadequate, but there is much more to that than just the search engine. It's the infrastructure, it's the connections of the knowledge that you have to build in order to enable a better search, and also to help enable those higher level AI capabilities to improve on that search. So that is another aspect of AI and KM coming together, and why KM needs AI. There's also a need to improve access to the collective knowledge, improving that access to, like I said before, through search. There are some search tools out here that are moving the needle to more semantic, natural language processing searching, and I'll get into some of those vendors later. Also, workers need personalized knowledge. Now, what I mean by personalized knowledge is knowledge delivered to the person in the right time, in the right context, in order to solve a problem that they have. Now, if you search through your collective repository of knowledge for a certain thing that you may need, you want to be able to get that information to be able to act on something that you need to deliver. I'll give you a scenario. If I'm a consultant and I'm working with a client, say an insurance client, and I've been asked to develop a knowledge management strategy. And if I work for a consulting company, one of the big ones, or even a mid-sized firm, I should be able to tap into the collective knowledge of my company and say, okay, I need a KM strategy that focuses on insurance, and pull up any templates that the organization has available, any tied to any expert that has insurance experience in developing KM strategies, any related information, knowledge that needs to go into developing the strategy. So all that becomes more personalized to the user in order to deliver on that specific task of developing in this case, a KM strategy in insurance. So that's just a small example, but it's a microcosm of what AI can do for is elevating that knowledge delivery to your personal needs. Next, I'll talk about need to enable workers to be productive by executing tasks and learning more efficiently and effectively. So with the example of bringing in the KM strategy and aligning that strategy with, okay, the experts, the tacit knowledge and the experts, I can then collaborate with those experts and learn more about developing a strategy right from the expertise in my organization. And so I am now executing tasks. I am learning more about how to do it more efficiently and effectively. And then I can then become a SME in that area for future people searching for that type of content and knowledge. So we are elevating that learning capability within our own repository through the infusion of AI and KM. And so at the end of the day, we need to collaborate and share what we know, right? So all the things I've talked about lead up to being able to share better, be able to collaborate better, be able to make decisions better with more connections with not only the tacit knowledge, but also explicit knowledge, tangible knowledge that you have. So everything that we're able to do collectively will aid in our ability to innovate, our ability to move up that chain, what Dr. Green was saying, from data to information to intelligence, knowledge, and cognition. As we move up that pyramid, we begin to innovate more as well. So this is just a example of why KM needs AI. So let's talk about a little bit more of why KM needs AI and how AI is really integral in the delivery of knowledge. Now, I have three areas that I focus on: is the dynamic nature of knowledge, the accuracy, and again, the personal. We just talked about some of these things in the previous slide. But in these three areas, the dynamic nature of knowledge, we want to make sure that this knowledge is constantly updated, renewed, refreshed, making sure that it is following your life cycle, content life cycle, or knowledge life cycle, and it's managed correctly. And so, all the connections, like I talked about before, being able to connect the tacit and the explicit knowledge, making sure all those pieces are consistently updated. A lot of times you are in a situation where someone has left the company or moved to a different department, and your access to that knowledge may say, okay, yeah, Joe was the expert in this in the KM strategy for insurance companies, but I see that, well, I can't contact Joe and find out later Joe has left the company, or Joe is in a different department, and that connection has never been updated. So it's important to have that governance of your knowledge to be able to ensure that dynamic component is intact. So it reflects, at the end of the day, it reflects your organization's brand, your organization's tone, and evolves over time. It affects your ability to be able to converse with your customers, your vendors that tap into your collective knowledge in your organization. The other piece is the accuracy, being accurate. Nothing hurts your access to knowledge when it's not accurate, right? And so that speaks to two things that I talk about a lot, and that's the authoritative source. What is that source in your organization that is the source of truth for that particular knowledge, right? So you want to make sure that you're pulling from that source of truth, and that when you connect that explicit knowledge to the tacit individuals, like in my previous example, that you're connected to the right authoritative voice. Now, that authoritative voice could be a department, or someone within that department, or any individual within the organization. So you want to not only have the source, the authoritative source of your explicit, tangible knowledge, but your authoritative voice of that individual area that has the expertise to give you additional insights into that knowledge. So at the end of the day, the knowledge is accepted by your organization as the source of truth. That's the accurate piece of that. And again, personal. AI helps in that perspective, because you want to make sure that we are providing our knowledge workers with the answers to the questions that they are seeking, with the knowledge that they need to get their job done in a more efficient and effective manner, and tailored in a way that's consumable for that user to be able to um, finish their job at the end of the day, do that task efficiently, and be successful in delivering at the end of the day. So those three pieces that you can walk away here from thinking about: in the delivery of knowledge, AI plays a role in a dynamic, accurate, and personal delivery of knowledge. Okay. Now that we've kind of set that base, now let's move into AI infused KM. And so some examples of that. How is AI playing a role here with knowledge management? One, AI is leveraged to predict trending knowledge areas and topics that your workers may need. The example I gave with the KM strategy for insurance companies: if you're doing a search, you're not only receiving that explicit knowledge, but tying it to the tacit expert, but you're also getting those other pieces of knowledge to say, okay, if you're looking for strategy, you may want to also look for these other pieces also may contribute to that strategy being built. It's almost akin to like the Amazon shopping experience, and oh, you bought this before, you may also want to buy these other items. But this is turned up quite a bit because it's going to predict other things that you may need that you may not even on the surface be searching for, but say, oh yes, this may help or will help in delivering what I want. So that predictive trending knowledge areas and topics will be able to be delivered through implementing KM with AI. Also identifying which target knowledge will resonate with your users. So AI will learn how a user works with the knowledge of your organization, and will push knowledge to that worker on a real-time basis, engaging that user with the right content and when they need it. Again, that goes back to the personalized nature of knowledge, individual preferences, and also then move into improving content decisions through leveraging machine learning. And so everything in the infusion of AI and KM starts with the understanding the algorithms, understanding how a person works, what knowledge they need, when they need it, any associated pieces of knowledge and experts that they may need to gain additional intelligence in delivering on their particular needs. So all of that works well when you infuse KM, AI infused with KM. So the other piece is that I'm going to get into this a little bit more with some of the vendors, is that we're seeing more mention of semantic search, natural language processing embedded in your search engine to provide a better search experience. It's almost akin to being able to type in something on the search bar. The search engine recognizes your language and what you've put into the search bar by natural language processing, taking that and then finding exactly what you need based on that ontology of what is meant by the words you have to actually typed into the search bar. So it's that natural language processing, ontology, alignment, and then that search is empowered to deliver that knowledge directly to you. So search engines and search technology is evolving, and knowledge management leverages search quite a bit into delivering what is needed. The other piece here is that something that we interact with quite a bit, and that is chatbots. You can't really kind of get away from accessing a company's site without something popping up. Hey, I'm here to help you. Let me know if you need any assistance. Sort of chatbot. So chatbots are evolving, and so again, natural language processing. You type your question into the bot. The bot understands the intent and the context of your question, and then delivers an answer based on what you are asking. And so chatbots are becoming more sophisticated, and they are delivering also ways to pull in additional information, or if the chatbot can't help you, it's intelligent enough to know, hey, I'm going to move you to a live person, and that live person, when it comes on, already understands what you've done with the chatbot, and able to specifically help you even more. Um, I had the experience ordering a laptop recently, and went through the chat bot. I say, oh, okay, this is a good opportunity to test this chat bot. So I'm going through the chat bot, putting my requirements in. The chat bot said, okay, you want this, want that. Okay, great. Then you should want a X laptop. And I said, well, I don't know if I want that particular laptop because it's really out of my price range. Let me talk to a representative. So the chatbot switched me to a representative. The representative already knew what I wanted. I was able to converse with that representative still through chat and say, hey, do you have any laptops that fit the description, but at a better price point? And it just so happens that the organization had a sale going on, and I was able to get a laptop that not only met my requirements, but exceeded my requirements at a lower price. So that's an example of chatbots and how it's working to deliver value for your customers and for the user experience. Okay, let's move this more into the tenets of AI infused KM. One, as we just talked about, connecting tacit and explicit knowledge through ontology management and knowledge mapping. Also, the tacit and explicit knowledge is constantly updated. We talked about that to make sure that that is still in sync through our KM governance and KM lifecycle management processes. Predictive analytics, the use of machine learning specifically to optimize that knowledge within the knowledge flow from the different people that are involved with that knowledge into the explicit knowledge and all of the related knowledge that is associated to that knowledge that you're looking for. And at the end of the day, provides that dynamic, accurate, and personal delivery that you're seeking. Okay, now that we kind of went through why KM needs AI and it's AI infused KM and what does it really deliver. Now I'm going to take what Annie, Dr. Green has presented of the host of technologies, because there are a host of technologies, and there are many vendors that can work with you to deliver that. I'm going to point out some of the leading vendors and some ones I've worked with and know about that you will want to keep your eye on, and you may want to start with in your journey to implement some of these things. Now, there are a few, there's more than this. There's more new knowledge paradigms, but these are three that I'm looking at the moment, and I want to share. One, we talked about chatbots that are evolving with not only natural language processing, but machine learning. And I can give you another example. If you have Google Home or Alexa or Siri, that's basically a chatbot, right? But it's a digital assistant. It's another higher level of the interaction with the system. And so, but you're speaking to it. And so it recognizing what you're saying and it's delivering based on what you tell it to deliver. And sometimes you may even experience if your digital assistant is in listening mode, actually delivering things to you because it's listening to what you say. I was at the house as we all are at this point in time, at the house, just kind of talking with my son, and a song came to my head. I said, "Hey, what's this song that has that starts with such and such a so and so?" And the Google Home came up. You want to play blah blah blah, and started playing it. I'm like, okay, now where did that come from? That was like I didn't ask the Google thing to play a certain song. It just was listening and then picked up those uh, key words, key phrases through natural language processing, and delivered a content in the form of a song to me without me even asking for it, which is really interesting in itself. So I usually have that, trying to be careful when I'm talking around the Google Assistant. But chatbots are elevating to that level of sophistication. Also, you may know about augmented intelligence. Augmented intelligence is AI, but more the human interaction with the intelligence. And Green, Dr. Green talked about that as well as we move up the pyramid. And the augmented intelligence talked about the co-pilot situation. You know, planes have been having co-pilots for a long time. It's that intelligence piece that is this helping, augmenting the human in decision making. And we in AI, I've been in AI since the late 80s and through the 90s. And we know in medicine, the practice of medicine and in the medical field, is that AI systems have been augmenting or helping doctors with decisions for quite some time since the 90s. So that idea of augmented intelligence has evolved as well, and you have vendors out here that are delivering that type of technology in order to aid that decision making process. The other piece is knowledge as a service, which Dr. Green also mentioned. I've been on the forefront preaching knowledge as a service for a number of years. I actually did a presentation back in March when we were still able to be someplace physically at the KM showcase. And I talked about knowledge as a service, and actually through the digital workplace, in which Dr. Green has also mentioned. This is a paradigm that we're moving to quite a bit in the digital transformation activities. And so that brings AI and KM together on a platform to deliver knowledge in a more efficient and effective manner, bringing in the aspects that I've just covered earlier. And so it brings in better search, the bots, incorporating the connection between the tacit and explicit knowledge, all those things, collaboration, better collaboration, knowledge as service enables that to happen. So from the new paradigms, now switching over to the technologies. Now these are going to be specific vendors that some of them I've worked with, some of them I know colleagues that have spoke very highly of them. And in the robotic process or intelligent automation world, we know RPA is used for those very routine business processes, and being able to automate those business processes, actually creating a digital worker. So companies like UiPath and Automation Anywhere and Blue Prism are leading in that area of robotic process automation. And my experience with RPA is that one, you have to remember that the rights that you give to a person delivering that particular delivering in that job is the same rights you need to give to the bot, but you have to be sure that you don't give the bot extra access that the bot doesn't need to make sure that that bot is very specific in delivering the task that has been designed for. Because a lot of times what I've seen is that the bots are just giving, oh, I know such and such role does this, and John has these access privileges. I'll just give John's access privileges to this bot. Well, that's not the smart thing to do, because you may not know other access privileges that John has, and just giving that blanketly to a bot will open up areas where the bot can get into things that it shouldn't. So you really have to make sure that you understand the access privileges and things like that. So that's just one thing to look for when you're doing robotic process automation. But it can kind of streamline and replace individuals and move people to other areas of your organization, or be able to reskill them for other things. But RPA is evolving, and these companies are in the forefront of doing that. So I did talk about a little bit about natural language search, semantic search. One of the companies, which is a startup that has really caught my attention, is Noonian Cybernetics. They have an enterprise NLP product that actually gets you to the search, uses NLP and ontology, gets you right to the answers we talked about before in a search. Also, they have the ontology builder that enables you to build these interactive ontologies. This organization has some success with PwC and LucidWorks, and so I think that's one organization that is to look out for. Again, the intelligent chatbots and IBM Watson is a great platform to develop chatbots, as well as we know that Microsoft is in that realm, and Google Assistant, and also Facebook is also improving technologies in that area. Okay. The other piece is, again, knowledge as a service. And so who is leading in those areas? We have SIFT. That is a mid-market type of company, small for vendor for more smaller companies, as well as Axero. We also have the IBM Digital Workplace Hub that is very good in helping you deliver digital workplaces, as well as Microsoft with Teams and that slew of technology there, as well as we talked about enterprise NLP and ontology builder by Noonian Cybernetics. That also fits into that parts of that knowledge as a service framework. The other piece, I want you guys to get a chance, look up cognitive digital twins. And that is enabling cognition, what Dr. Green talked about, and it's kind of blending both areas of creating a digital version of what's in the physical world. So it's enabled by AI machine learning algorithms to allow to acquire, process, and store information, to think and make decisions. And IBM and Microsoft, again, are leading in some of the research in that area, in those areas, in the cognitive digital twins paradigm. So look out for that. And again, the augmented intelligence, which I talked about before too. Some companies in that leading in that space is Cognitive Scale, PureFacts, and Jumio. So those, if you're looking to build in those certain paradigms, these are some of the vendors to start talking to. And then taking Dr. Green's technologies, start to build a reference architecture framework to be able to deliver on some of these platforms that I've mentioned. Okay, hopefully I didn't take up too much time, but this is me in a nutshell. I'm also involved with the AI and Ethics editorial board from the AI and Ethics Journal, and also an advisor in the AI Policy Exchange. So I appreciate everybody listening, and turn it over.
There you go. Thank you, Dr. Ram. That was fascinating. And thank you for not being afraid to name names and let us know about some of those vendors out there in the landscape. We really appreciate that. Well, we do have a few moments for questions, so I want to encourage the 50 some odd participants in this virtual speaker room to not be shy and go ahead and drop those in the chat. I can relay them directly to the speakers. But Dr. Green and Dr. Ram, while I have you, I have a couple of questions myself, but my first question is a logistical one. Are either of you available perhaps to join the networking area for a moment after this session, where folks have the opportunity to engage in a little more intimate setting with
Sure.
you and ask questions and whatnot? Okay, I'm seeing a yes from Dr. Rim, and
Yes.
Dr. Green's nodding her head. Yes, so that's wonderful. So for those of you who would like to, don't forget about that networking area. It'll be on the left-hand side of the Feedloop virtual platform there. And you know, the keynotes are coming up, but there is a little bit of time, so you can definitely do that. I have a couple questions for y'all. Dr. Green, my first question is for you. I was so just elated to see your metaphor of the knowledge organization as the body, right? And so when we start to lean into that metaphor of data being the blood kind of churning through the system, and then understanding the vital functions that we have to keep online and keep going, and especially in times of critical mass, it's almost like triaging a patient when you're working through your knowledge strategy and those priorities. Let me ask you, what for those folks that may have come from a heavy knowledge background, but may not have been privy to some of that systems background or kind of some of that systems theory, do you have any pointers for kind of increasing that systems mindset for folks that are starting to blend KM and AI?
Well, sort of. Yes, we have to sit and come up with the components first. So the interesting thing is, if you sit back and you look at the 5 areas that I've showed, then you can actually start to develop a system from there. Think about data, because when you start with data, you're bringing in raw data, and you've been familiar with that, and even though you're at the knowledge point, the key is, I can't do anything with knowledge unless I have good data. So let's go back and think about that. And the key to that is, with knowledge management, the taxonomies that you put in together, the ontologies that you put in together, because those are what actually propagates up into your neural networks of AI. So if you combine those and start to think about networking, and start to think about, like I said, even the relationships that go, and make certain that they represent your reality. As always, I mean, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it is a duck. So call it that. For some reason, we want to change the names and make them, for lack of another word, these sexy names that we think sound good, but it's not necessary. Let's use names that are familiar with us, and let's build taxonomies and categories that make sense. And I think that's what will bring them together with looking at a system, because you'll see most of the relationships that you need.
Love that. Love that. And Dr. Ram,
Does
I
that make
just
sense?
have, it sure does. Thank you, Dr. Green. Dr. Ram, I only have time for one more question before we wrap up. But you mentioned RPA, and my organization actually did launch Blue Prism, and we're starting down the RPA journey. But I'm so curious, what are some examples of implications for RPA, specifically with knowledge tasks? What are some examples of knowledge tasks that would be appropriate for robotic processing?
Well, you have to remember that for RPA, it has to be those routine tasks. And it's not much decision making. Well, you try to limit the amount of decision making that the bot has to do. However, you can program that decision making within the bot, where there's some particular forms that need to be filled in automatically by the bot, making decisions based on some parameters to determine which form is correct to use. Things like that is sufficient for bots to handle. There are some instances where companies are looking at more sophisticated bots that will enable its use through more machine learning aspects. And so I cannot think of specific examples where more advanced bots may be used, but when it comes to decision making, it shouldn't be too intricate for the bot unless you do have a handle on the AI piece, because you want it routine, but as it changes, you wanted that human in the loop to help make those decisions too.
Keep it simple. That's what I'm hearing. All right. Well, again, thank you both for sharing your insights and laying out a foundation for us this morning. I think this will be helpful going into the rest of the track. I want to thank all the attendees. And for those of you on the Feed Loop virtual platform, when you're logged into the platform, on the left-hand side, you'll see the networking area. And it's just underneath the sessions and exhibit hall on the left-hand pane there. So we will let everyone adjourn to check out that networking area, check out the exhibit hall, and attend that, I believe, the Microsoft keynote coming up in a couple hours. So thanks everyone again for joining. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.